joined by Ralph James of the Met Office. Fantastic. Ralph, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, James. Yes, my name is Ralph James. I'm the FM and Technical Services Manager at the Met Office in its headquarters building in Exeter, Devon.
Fantastic, great stuff. And I understand you've got a pretty strong engineering background.
Yes, I like to call myself an engineer. Yes, I am. I am an engineer by background. Yes, electrical and mechanical biased, with a long career stretching back, more than 30 years now. But primarily around the weather industry. Monitoring of temperatures, humidities. All the good stuff that goes into an environmental type monitoring system. Even to and including radar systems. I've worked on those in the past as well.
Fantastic, great to see. Well, from your background, it sounds like you're in the right place, being at the Met Office. And indeed, your role at the Met Office, you're centrally involved with the plans for electrification of the fleet. And we're very happy to say you've got some very, very fine charge points in some of your workplace offices. That's becoming quite a project, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Some years ago, at least 2, maybe 3 years ago now, we undertook a significant change to our car parks. But we'd listened to our people, and our people were beginning to get into the electric vehicle market, whether it be plug-in hybrids or pure electric vehicles. So we seized the opportunity when we were further developing the car park to see if there was any way we could fit charge points onto the existing electrical infrastructure. And there was, which was brilliant. So we took our first steps, looked at the marketplace at the time and decided what it was as a civil service organisation we would need to do, which would be to make sure that we're driving the right behaviours from our commuters and that we could charge people for the use of that energy, but then recover it backwards, but at a cost-neutral basis so that neither the Chancellor was out of pocket nor the user. And from our early engagement with the market, there was only one supplier at that point. But PodPoint fitted that bill absolutely perfectly. I get the MI. I can report good things up to the exec. For example, prior to lockdown, the latest lockdown, it looks like we'd drawn enough energy for a Nissan Leaf to drive around the equator. The things had only been going a year. And, that's a sort of high-level, statement that really does make people, including myself, an avowed petrol head, that really does make you sit up and take notice. And when you see how much it cost those users to travel that far, there's also the economic benefit to be had as well. So, based on that and based on the government's targets for net zero, the Met Office has stood by its principles and it is leading by example to provide as many as 100 charge points, separate charge points, within 2 to 3 years from now. So yes, that commitment is strong. Not least, we are quite a disparate organisation. We have locations throughout the UK. And so we're now into the business of thinking, okay, as the energy density of the batteries increases, maybe it is becoming viable to fit charge points at some of our interim offices, so that people travelling from Exeter, say, to Birmingham, it's possible to stop en route at one of our locations, receive that energy for free. We know that we can do this, but we also know that the pod point as a concept, you can actually have a couple of people using the same charge mechanism. The private user pays for it, the business user doesn't. So that keeps the Chancellor happy, benefit in kind. So actually what we have, I think, represents the best in class.
Yeah, superb. You've just given an absolute sort of tour de force on how to do workplace charging for a disparate organisation. So yeah, that's great work. In terms of the electrification of the company fleet, obviously you talked there, you were sending a Nissan Leaf figuratively around the equator, which is a fine effort. Are you seeing an increased prevalence of EVs in the vehicle fleet?
Yes, we are. So the PodPoint, I'm going to call it a system because it's multiple charge points over multiple locations. We have currently 6 chargers online with another 16 going online, maybe this week, next week. But there was a time when I had barely one page of users on the management information system. I'm now up to 2 pages with people telling me, "Come on, when are these new ones getting installed?" So, I would say we're looking at maybe 5-6 people per quarter an increase. People are beginning to make those choices now, and really look at their travel. We have a green travel plan for our location, and obviously that's centered around public transport. But also anything that we can do to promote that green travel plan. We can talk about cycling to work and all of that, but oftentimes you don't want to arrive to work sweaty. There are only so many showers in the building. I can't squeeze any more in. So the EV thing is really beginning to charge forward. So it's difficult to keep up with demand, and I guess it's really getting quite a challenge for us to do it economically. As we begin to eat into our available capacity, you have to make some really serious choices, and it really does demonstrate then how committed as an organisation we are to continuing to electrify not only our own business fleet, but also allow our staff to make those right informed choices that's good for the environment, good for sustainability, and good for UK PLC.
Fantastic. What an overview that is. And I think you've covered a few things there. Certainly, even at Pod Point, obviously huge fans of electric vehicles. They're no panacea. They're part of a mix of solutions, cycling, public transport as well. So we definitely echo that. And you covered some of the practical considerations around capacity, etc., which all organisations have once they start to get to that scale. But I guess for me, it's just really exciting to see this example of someone an organisation that's put in charge points. And sure enough, what happens? Hey, you get more and more people are coming back who actually want to drive electric cars. So the proof's in the pudding, and you're a great example of that. Of course, this electrification of vehicles and the charging infrastructure, that's one part of your sort of sustainability remit. I presume there are other parts as well. You mentioned cycling and public transport usage, etc. What are your other sort of sustainability?
So many. I'm going to talk about the soft things first. So our biodiversity. We are one of the only public bodies, certainly the only one in the southwest, to have the Biodiversity Benchmark, which includes a Devon meadow. It includes various species. The way we cut our grass, for instance, we don't just hack it with a lawnmower. We keep it to a certain length. We only cut it so many times. Now that actually then gives a benefit in terms of well-being to our staff, that we can provide different types of areas. That's just one element. We have recycling rates that most people would only ever dream about. I think one of the most recent figures was 86% recycled of all of our waste arisings, and the rest of that going to energy to waste. So we are passionate about that sustainability agenda. Single-use plastic is we don't have any anymore. We simply don't. We've gone to bamboo forks, for example. Bamboo forks and knives, that sort of thing. Plastic single-use cups, the Costa cups. No, we don't have those anymore either. So everything that we do is designed. Every initiative we do is designed to capture the imagination and really fire up the staff. And we have had a couple of people through, particularly into the property management team, which is where I work, doing studies on recycling habits. And what we've seen is that the habits that we can talk about at work are then being reflected at home as well. So, and I mean, that is another really good story. Other enhancements, there's no way around this. We run a huge supercomputer. It is vast. It drags an enormous amount of energy off the grid. Our average site load is between 4.2 and 4.5 megawatts.
Oh, wow. Right.
This is huge. And so anything that we can do to reduce our impact on the environment, we do. 2 examples that I'm going to share with you, if I may. The first is some years ago, we fitted 1,000 solar panels, which, because they're sited on a steel roof, are exceeding their design capacity. There's 256 watt panels, 1,000 of them. There's an absolutely fantastic amount of energy being generated, but when you think about what that means in terms of running a supercomputer, it barely scratches the surface. So for an organisation that is keen on its environmental credentials, what else can we do? Now, we have just completed a borehole enhancement project. Now, what that means is that up until very recently, we were having to cool our supercomputers using a combination of refrigerant-generated chilled water, but we had to reject the heat through cooling towers, which was a mix of borehole and fresh water from the mains. So we had a couple of young engineering students, budding engineering students, and I posed them a question. I was passionate about youth leadership and development, and said, come on, how can we make better use of this water? So they said, well, look, if you treat it and you soften it and you get rid of the bugs and the nasties, you could potentially save all of that mains water coming through the gate. We don't believe you because we're professional engineers. How wrong were we? The two young guys, the aspiring engineers, were spot on. We've now delivered their project. Potential savings for us are around about 200 cubic meters of water a day.
Oh, wow.
Not coming off the mains. Now, I'm not going to state figures in terms of monetary value, but it's a significant amount of money. It pays for itself in less than 15 months, and projected benefits then onwards for another 20 years. So,
wow.
That is a major commitment to our sustainability agenda. That's just two examples, and we are constantly looking for things like that to do, and engage with the local community as well. And that's a good thing.
Wow. Well, leadership, I would suggest, is the word that comes to mind there. That's absolutely spectacular across the piece there. So thank you for sharing that with us. I'm now going to focus into more of the climate change and decarbonisation type agenda. Now, one of the first questions that comes about is people trying to understand the difference between what is meant by climate and what is meant by weather. Now, I'm going to put my hypothesis across about this, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, and that is essentially that climate is long-term averages of weather. Is that approximately right?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. The weather is the here and now. So, we have a weather pattern, it may be 24 hours, 48 hours, and we can forecast the weather out for a good 14 days these days with our supercomputers, with a degree of accuracy that it was unheard of. 20 years ago, you could maybe forecast 24 hours in advance. Let's say that's it. But yeah, the weather is the here and now, and the climate is what's happening to those long-term weather trends, the frequency of which we're going to get storms or high temperatures. So it's really... You're absolutely right. It's a difficult one to explain, but of course we got a whole building full of scientists that's what they do. We got the weather forecasters. Weather is different, but we've also got the Met Office Hadley Centre for Climate Research, which they do focus on models that run out. I've seen models running out 200 years in advance of our current date today. You can see when they turn them on because the electricity meters rise up. The supercomputers are big.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I was just thinking that must be the variables in there must be incredible. So let's talk, I guess, a little bit about that. I think working in that field at the moment can be challenging. We seem to, every day, or every week at least, seems to be some kind of record, a record high, a record low. We see, Arctic and Antarctic melting at a strong rate. There are alarming fires in Siberia, and particularly we've seen California recently. So I guess what this does is it brings the importance of the decarbonisation climate change agenda to the fore. But how does that impact the morale of meteorologists? You mentioned before we were talking, before we started recording, that you're a trained meteorologist yourself. Is it a challenging place to work in that regard?
It's actually quite exciting because we are at the forefront of both weather and climate science. And UK government has put us on that pedestal, and we've retained our place on that pedestal as world leaders and respected throughout the world for what we do and what our contribution is. So I think a lot of people will find it quite exciting to be part of it. And whatever part we play, we are, as an organisation, better together, and we are experts by nature in everything that we do. And we are trusted partners. We simply are.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the importance of weather and forecasting to the energy system. So we're moving to a system which has ever more renewable supply, and particularly wind and solar. And that means ever more importance of forecasting. So not only do we need to know what's happening in the world of climate change through the changing climate, and you're providing data on that, but actually you've become a critical data source for the new decarbonisation energy system as well. That's a really exciting place to be for the Met Office.
Yes, it is. And the Met Office have been in supporting the renewables industry now for a great many years, whether that be products, services, new developments, new forecasting techniques. If you think about where we are in the southwest, and when the feed-in tariffs were pretty generous, a lot of people did put the grid under enormous strain. And so having a forecast product, let's just say that's generated by the Met Office, that might predict how much energy can be generated from a solar farm, and then you could say agile enough to then fix a price for that energy in the future, whether that be offshore, onshore wind, tidal power, your standard solar power. It's very, very important to know what is going to be generated, so that the national grid, let's call it the national grid, the national infrastructure, can actually cope with these different energy delivery methods. I guess it's important still to have the base load. And the Met Office itself has recently gone to a carbon neutral supply. So rather than a standard energy mix, yes, it's more expensive, but again, it demonstrates our commitment to doing our bit. We're incredibly proud that we've been able to do that. You've seen the amount of energy that we use. So the fact that we can guarantee that is from renewable and carbon-free source is a big statement for us to make. But no, back to the industry, which is, it even goes to as far as providing real detailed forecasts that may give the people that are installing these things that competitive edge. Back in the industry, when the industry was focused on the floating platforms in the North Sea, where you were forecasting wave heights to within a few centimetres, because it was absolutely critical that you had calm seas, calm weather. That was a major competitive advantage to those that were taking up that service. And I imagine that is still the case now. I think there's a lot of work being done at the Met Office with its models, with its forecast models, and with the way it delivers its services, and the type of information tailored to the needs of the business who's asking for that information. Not just a weather forecast, but the data that it actually needs in a format that's easily get-atable. That's a rubbish word. Easily available.
Indeed.
Get-atable.
Yeah. Tremendous. And of course you have, looking at doing a bit of research ahead of the interview, so you had a project essentially on the National Grid Zone website, the ESO, with the ESO, about solar forecasting, where they said after the project you improved the accuracy, or the ESO improved their accuracy of expected yields from solar farms by 5%. And that's just by having a better understanding of likely cloud cover, etc., which I guess that backs up what you're saying. This isn't just a forecast. It's not just Britain and we like talking about weather. This is actually critical commercial data as we move forward. And our energy system, your importance rises really to the fore of those markets.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just limited to the UK. That type of service is offered throughout the globe. Did you know we did space weather forecasting?
I did not know that, no.
Not a lot of people know that, but when you think about the importance of solar flares for the grid, they don't happen very often, but the ability to protect the grid by shutting it down, maybe satellites and the grid, we can think about Canada in 1980, whenever it was, they got hit by a solar storm. The ability of somebody like the Met Office to predict that and then feed that into National Grid's infrastructure, that's really powerful as well. And exciting things are being developed by our scientists almost on a day-to-day basis.
Ralph, this is awesome. I mean, I've come into this now. I'm super energized about the Met Office. This is amazing. Cool. So we're very aware, I guess, of the importance of all these things and flexibility. This whole new world of renewables. I haven't started factoring in space weather, but I'll know to do that moving forward. But we look at our charging network. We're very, very interested in the likes of smart charging, being able to actually change when vehicles charge in the future to match times of not only low demand but also actually high supply, because soon we're getting to this world where, hey, it's windy, we want to charge things, etc. I think one of the things that really I wanted to leave the conversation with is we can see a lot of bad news in the world of climate, and I think there's no doubt we've got a lot of challenges that the world is facing in that way. But I see so much going on the engineering side, and you've given us some great examples of those today, that make me really optimistic. We've decarbonised our grid a load already, but it feels like it's just the start. It feels like we might do that, might be able to succeed here. From talking to you, I get the impression you're going to share that view.
I think I'm going to not only share that view, but also expand on it a little while. People often ask me, well, what's an engineer do? And there's a big difference between an engineer and a technician. An engineer, if you think about where engineers came from, they were the ones that were using their ingenuity to solve problems for people that didn't understand that they had a problem. And I think the engineering field, profession, various disciplines behind it, they will provide a solution for this. Now, will people be able to listen? Will they act on the advice? That's another question. But it's going to cost money, but it can be done. I'm convinced of it. I do remain convinced of it. If people can just get into their heads that every little bit counts, then I think we can make a big difference, particularly here in the UK, where you've got a government that's setting the standard. You've got a lot of organisations that are being exemplar organisations. You have companies such as EDF, PodPoint, who are providing the means by which, let's call them the agents of change. They are providing the agents of change on which organisations like me can begin to make a difference. So I remain confident and hopeful that engineering solutions will be found for what is a problem.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know where to go. I want to sort of rise up and join your revolution now after that. I feel, totally on board, which might be a good place to stop, Ralph. So I just want to thank you very, very much indeed for giving us a window into the world of the Met Office and the amazing array of things that you're working on. And thank you so much for giving us your time today.
My pleasure, my absolute pleasure.